Hello, good day. My name is Gabriel, and I will be presenting on the topic of roguelike and permanence, identifying the impact of progress permanence in roguelike games on the factor of replayability. So, first things first, we'll take a look at the introduction of the topic. So, we might have heard of the term roguelikes or roguelites before, so let's take a quick talk about that. So roguelites revolve around the game being compared to the original 1980s game Rogue, thus using the term roguelike, similar to Souls-like being compared to Dark Souls. As for the term roguelites, however, this is a term that emerged from two words, roguelites and light. Light being usually a less fully equipped version of something. And this definition is usually true in the current understanding, as the games under the genre of roguelites usually lack the potency where permadeath is often associated with roguelikes, true roguelikes. And because of this, they are often considered to be less superior, and therefore, instead of using the term roguelikes, a lot of players have opted to go for the term roguelites instead. As for the proper definition of a roguelike, the Berlin interpretation of roguelikes have been cited by many papers when they are working on roguelikes. And this interpretation was decided on the International Roguelikes Development Conference in 2008. It's an event held in Berlin, thus it being called the Berlin Interpretation. And it has been known to be like the general interpretation of what a roguelike would be. So in the current graphic on screen, we can see the nine high factor values of the Berlin interpretation of roguelikes, as well as six low factor values. Um, some these values have been critiqued a lot by the community, but this is an established definition that we will be using to convey what a roguelike would be, just a base calibration. Onto the factor of replayability. Roguelikes counter this. They introduce content in ways of procedural generation and a lot of the other factors explored in the definition earlier. But one of the reasons why players enjoy replaying the game is because permadeath removes progress. However, a lot of the players nowadays, they seem to be turned away at the idea that their actions have no significance on the progress of the game. Therefore, developers have opted to take elements of a roguelike and sprinkle them into their current game to encourage replayability by not punishing the players as much when they lose a play session. For the state permanents that are carried over every time you die, the study today will look at only three types of state permanence, with it being lobby, attribute, as well as item state permanence. Lobby refers to NPCs, access to certain rooms, interaction options, or specific objects. Attributes refer to status attributes like hit points, damage points, speed, etc. And items refer to key items, inventory, equipment, and sometimes it may also intersect with it being a lobby type state persistence. And Upgrading items in this case would be considered inventory persistence. This is the result of the comparative study that has been done in order to determine the game's relationship between its replayability as well as its adherence to what a roguelike would be. And according to this table right here, we can see that starting with the highest amount of adherence is Crypt of the Necrodancer, start at 11.5 points. Second place is held by two games, Slay the Spire as well as Inscription at 9 points. Hades holds the third place at 8, as well as Binding of Isaac holding last. Next, taking a look at frequency of state persistence type implemented, we will tackle them by rank. So inventory state persistence has the highest count of implementation, where it is implemented across all of the games. Second is narrative persistence, which happens in 4 of the 5 games implemented. Third is character unlocking states at 3 out of 5 games. At fourth place, we have dungeons unlocking state and boss unlock states at only 2 out of the 5 games implementing it. At fifth place, which is last place, we have lobby cosmetic upgrades, boss mechanics unlocks, as well as attribute state persistence, which is only in one of the game. Taking a quick look into the average replay value score determined by play hours of each of the games, we can see that Hades has the highest amount of play hours at 41.5 hours. In second place, we have the Binding of Isaac at 37.75 hours. Slay the Spire comes in third at 32.5 hours. In fourth place, we have Crypt of the Necrodancer at 16.5 hours. And at fifth place, we have Inscription at 14 hours. Next, taking a look at persistent conditions required for the persistence to apply, we will take a look at the first game, Hades. Hades has conditions which comprises spending specific currency, counts of boss defeats, as well as counts of final boss defeats. Taking a look at the Binding of Isaac, we have conditions of state persistence, which comprises count of final boss defeats, conditions for the character unlock, which are usually not displayed to the player, as well as conditions for item pool unlocks, which are also not. Following that, Crypt of the Necrodancer's conditions are character unlocks via rescuing in dungeons, clearing objectives with certain characters to unlock more characters, as well as final boss defeats. And it also has currency persistence upon checkpoint reached, as well as spending said currency to apply state persistence across playthroughs. And similar conditions apply for the Slay the Spire and Inscription, which comprises dying. But for Inscription specifically, dying will unlock mechanics. Meanwhile, in Slay the Spire, playthrough count is where it's at. Following that, we also have character unlocking for Slay the Spire, which requires you to beat the game with the current latest unlocked character in order to progress, as well as Inscription requiring purchase of certain items during your play session in order for you to progress within the next play session. The items would not carry over, but they have narrative memory, and the items remember that they are being purchased, and during the next play session that would resume. In the early game, player would focus on the attribute state permanence, as well as unlocking states of content and mechanics. In the mid game, player focus would shift more towards specific parts of the attributes, as well as upgrading states of equipment and items. And in the end game, players would focus on leveraging challenges to unlock states of content, currency spending of specific types usually earned through completing the challenges, special item state unlocking, as well as character state unlocking. So for the conclusion of this topic, in terms of roguelike and permanence, the comparative study that was conducted has a small sample size that results in less accuracy than desired of the data. The instruments used are also based on non-quantifiable data, so it is hard to objectively verify the facts, and bigger sample size are needed, and refined methodology will be crucial if this question is to be tackled in the future. And in terms of the study itself, it hoped to have highlighted the relationship of progress permanence in roguelike games on the factor of replayability. This study seeks to be useful to game developers by making accessible the data on the forms of progress permanence, persistence conditions, as well as successful implementations on the market. And even though the study leaves room for larger sample size of study as well as casting a wider net for case studies, but as is, it can still prove especially useful for emerging game developers with little to no knowledge on the field to start out with a direction which they can refine depending on their use cases. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.